Welcome back, guys, to NBA Previews. I am Jiarmani Depena, and with me is resident Heat fan Matt Hanifan. And obviously, by the thorough introduction by myself, you guys can assume that we are doing the Miami Heat today with NBA Previews. And we're going to talk about how, like, the outlook on this team from last season and try to deep dive what we can see about Miami going into the new year. But Matt, I wanted to give you the floor, my man. I wanted to see how you're doing, and I want to see how you feel about your Miami Heat from last year and going into this season. So, what's up?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Basketball season's just under a week away. We were recording this on October 17th, so no, man, I'm doing great. I'm doing good. Um, this team wasn't so good last year. I mean, their record 46 and 36. They were 21st in offense, fifth in defense. Um, the part that wasn't good was the injuries. Of course, this team was one of the most injured teams in the league. Uh, Duncan Robinson, suffered a back injury toward the end of the season. Jimmy Butler sprained his MCL in the playing game. Terry Rozier suffered a neck injury that put him in a neck brace, which no one really knew how it happened. Just woke up one day and his neck was really sore. Tyler Hero missed a chunk of games throughout the regular season with ankle and foot injuries. This team was just injured. They had 35 different starting lineups. I believe that was a franchise record. Um, which is, I mean, you look at most teams in the league don't have, more than 20, 25 different starting lineups in a single season. There just wasn't much continuity at all with this team. They were never healthy at the same time. They haven't really been healthy at the same time all that often. At least the core players, Bam, Jimmy, and Hero. They get they win a playing game, or they lose their first playing game to Philadelphia. Um, then they beat Chicago in the play-in, and then they get waxed in 5 games to your Boston Celtics. Uh, Game 2 was fun when they made like 100 threes. They got hot from deep, but couldn't really do that throughout the rest of the series without Terry, without Jimmy. Um, it wasn't a fun season. I'll just it it was dreadful. Um, not last postseason, 2 postseasons ago was fun. The regular season for that wasn't fun. So really, the last 2 regular seasons have just been dreadful for Miami, in more ways than one. So that's just kind of where my head's at from last season.
Yeah, like the crux of it all is like you got injuries, you got like even though like and you still have Spoelstra, fantastic coach, and obviously like you alluding to the finals run as the eighth seed 2 years ago. But let's look more at the positive outlooks on at least what like my at least like there's two that come to mind. I'm pretty sure you can highlight some more, but I would say Bam really like over the last couple of seasons really started coming into his own, and he's starting to be more and more recognized as one of the top centers in the NBA. And Jaime Jaquez. I think he was like I could say, I think it's fair to say he had himself a pretty good rookie season last year. No.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he was one where he led the team. He missed time with a groin injury middle of the season, yet he still led the team in games. With 75 games played. I mean, yeah, 75 is a lot, but and not a lot of players reach 70, 75 plus in today's day and age. But uh, I think Pat called him a warrior. In his end of season press conference, like he had a good rookie season. Yeah, he was. There was a stretch in time after Tyler got hurt. He got hurt in I want to say it was like early November with an ankle injury he suffered against Memphis. It was like my memory may be escaping me a little bit, but it was like 7, 8 games into the season. Like it wasn't very much into the season. And then Jaime from that point on for like a 30-game stretch he was putting up numbers. Like he was really that's when he really took a step up, with the more on ball responsibility offensively. And really just doing everything with the ball in his hands, like him in the mid post, him getting those mid post touches. Like he's really good in that area. Wasn't necessarily as efficient from 3 point range, but like you could see there was a little like something there. And then he gets hurt, comes back, doesn't really find his footing much at all throughout the rest of the regular season heading into the postseason. I mean, there were glimpses of it here and there, but it wasn't consistent. Bam is another one where I just don't know why this guy hasn't won Defensive Player of the Year yet. I genuinely don't like. I get it. He doesn't get blocks. He doesn't get steals, but I don't think there's a more versatile defender on the planet. At least at this stage, like you can argue like maybe Draymond Green, just based on what he's done throughout his career. And obviously, Draymond in his peak was different than Draymond now, but there just isn't a more versatile defender than Bam. I'll hold that to my chest and I'll stand on that. Like there just isn't. He's better than Gobert defensively. I think he's better than Wembanyama defensively, even though he averages like 100 blocks a game. And I'm sure Wembanyama will pass him over time just based on how good he is, and how good he will get, because he's like 9 feet tall.
Anomaly.
Yeah, I just think he's better than the guys he finished ahead of. Just he's the one of the few guys in the league. Like people throw the 1 through 5 label on there. He's actually one of the only guys who can legitimately defend 1 through 5, and he's been doing it since he was a rookie.
Yeah,
like there's, I mean, I may have talked about this with you before, but there was a clip from his, I mean, it's a clip, 5-6 second clip, but there was a clip from his rookie season where he was locking up Steph, I think the year after he won the MVP, like on the perimeter. And like he made Steph pick up his dribble and he like locked him down. And like obviously that's like the viral clip of like, yeah, he can defend 1 through, but like he can actually defend 1 through 5. And then last year he became more scheme versatile. Like they were playing him more in drop. And he's such a good, like and it's different for him because like usually guys who are playing, the drop defense or bigger guys, like I'm just naming a few, like Embiid, like Jokic, like those aren't guys who are playing up at the level of the screen when they're in like defending the pick and roll. And he was a guy who they shifted, instead of switching him all the time, they shifted into playing him more in drop last season. And like, yeah, he's undersized for being a center. He's 6'9", like that. He's an undersized center, but yet he still found a way to disrupt every single lob attempt that was thrown his way. He's still doing that now, but he does it every single night, and hold his own. And with how many injuries they had, the Heat finished again 5th in defense, and that
He's been
was
top 5 in
largely
defensive player of
because
the
of
year
Bam.
voting for like ever since the turn of the decade. So just
Yeah,
throw
well,
that
like
real
he's
quick out
never been in, like last year I think was the first year he finished top 3 ever in his career. Like he finished I think top 5. I want to say 5 or 6 years, but it was always 4th and 5th.
Yeah,
Like he was always in the conversation, but he's never actually won the award. And again, to me, obviously there's inherent bias, but I do think it's just disrespectful because I don't think there's a better defender than him on the planet. At least I think he should absolutely be in the conversation. I don't think he's been in the conversation, amongst the consensus, the media, whoever you want to label it as.
Yeah, just to throw this question at you, since the turn of the decade when he was actually starting to be in those top 5, like in voting, would you say there was a year that you feel like he should have won? Like any year in particular?
I know you're not going to like this answer, but the Marcus Smart one.
I had a feeling it was coming, but I just wanted to see. But
I think that year was, I mean, you could argue last year too. Like I think last year, I mean, again, Wembanyama, they look at, I think the majority of media members when they they do this stuff, maybe I'm wrong. They don't, it's defense is harder to quantify, but people do look at blocks and steals, at least to some extent.
counting stats.
Yeah, like they look at that stuff as opposed to like it's hard, I think, to quantify, harder to quantify defense than it is to quantify offense. And so they look at blocks and steals, and that's their judgment. Not to say Gobert's a bad defender. I think in the ecosystem that he's in, he's a fine defender. He's a really good defender, actually. But I mean, yeah, we know he's gotten played off the floor in the playoffs, whatever. He got benched during the Olympics, fine. But in the ecosystem that he's in Minnesota, he's a really good defender. Same thing with Wembanyama, even though I'm not as high on Wembanyama defensively as some others. Obviously, I think he'll get to that point, but I do think Wembanyama has like clear deficiencies in like defending the pick and roll. Like dudes would go at him, but he was still amazing because of how good of a rim protector he is for obviously being the height that he is. Because again, he's 9 feet tall. He can swat anything from any area and he can cover so much ground. Like it's teams aren't going to challenge him at the rim that much. That's just, players aren't going to do that. But I do think Bam should have won it at least that year that Smart won it.
Okay.
Because I do think they were, again, a top 5 defense. They were one of the best teams in the East with PJ, with Kyle. Like that was 22, their first year. And I just think from what he was doing from like a switchability standpoint, because that team was like switch heavy with PJ there. And so that would be the year that just would come to mind right away. And not to say
Yeah,
that PJ, or I mean, the thing with Smart was he was, I guess, the best defender on the best defensive team in the league, even though I think Rob was probably the best one, but Rob just wasn't available. That was the problem.
yeah. I would say I think especially when it came to like the fact that like the Celtics had like the big turnaround in 22 when that happened. Obviously, like I'm not gonna go into like a gigantic Celtics rant, but like I feel like it was kind of like one of those things like Smart, he wasn't leading the league in steals or anything like that, but like it was like to your point, it seemed like that year in particular, they were looking more at like pretty much like the other like things that are included with defense, not just
Yeah.
blocks and counting stats with steals and whatnot. Like because if that was the case, then somebody like Gobert would have won another one.
Right.
But I do believe that Bam is going to be in line for one sooner rather than later.
Me
But I
too.
think he's due. He's. I feel like he's long overdue at this point. But at least another thing that I really enjoyed. Well, and because just keeping it on the subject of Bam, is that like he's really started to like get on the uptick when it came to his offensive game. So I wanted to kind of like pick your brain of like how Bam has kind of like evolved a little bit offensively because I feel like now it's like especially the last two seasons I feel like it's starting to become more and more of like Bam's team, at least to me, in terms of like him being more involved, not just being like like that point center who's going to just look to hand it off on the pick and roll and whatnot. But I want to ask, like, what have you seen in like Bam's game offensively that's allowed him to evolve? And you think like, has he hit a ceiling or is he still growing?
No, he's not hit his ceiling, and here's why. It was after the 2021 season, where it was the COVID shortened 72 game season. They get bounced by Milwaukee in the first round. They got swept actually. Obviously, Milwaukee went on to win the championship. The biggest problem with Bam at that point was his hesitancy, specifically his hesitancy to shoot mid-range shots. Like you saw the flashes, but he was always hesitant. He wasn't catching them going right away. Like he was always like a big problem throughout that playoff series was the fact that they cut the head off the snake with the DHO. Like they wouldn't allow Duncan Robinson to you know get the ball and dribble handoffs. They would they would cut off that, and then obviously they would do the same thing with Jimmy and some of the other guys on the perimeter. Like they would do that with Nunn, who was still there at the time. Like they were cutting the head off the snake, and it forced Bam because Lopez was playing in a deeper drop. Lopez was playing off Bam, and it forced Bam to take shots, and he ultimately was hesitating, and it was just like that was a big problem. And then the next season in 22, when Kyle got there, there was a greater they did the less dribble handoffs. They kind of shifted away from that. I mean, they still did it, but like they shifted away from that kind of offense. And Bam was taking more mid-range shots, and he became more aggressive, and he wasn't hesitating as much. And we saw the same thing last year. Like last year, it was that same kind of trend. Like the thing with Bam though was his biggest problem was he was taking contested twos. Like he was not saying overly aggressive, but the problem with him is like he would dribble into contested twos from 10 feet or around that range. Like that was his biggest problem last year was like dribbling into that. And like the thing with him, considering the spacing the team had, is the paint was always clogged to some extent. And the Heat generally haven't been a good cutting team, nor have they been a good they don't have a lot of like their two best players were non-spacers, I guess, to where Jimmy isn't going to get respected from 3-point range. He shot a career high last year, but it was on 1.5 attempts, like, or 2.5, whatever it was. Like it wasn't much volume at all. The same thing with a few of the other guys on the roster. I mean, obviously Duncan's Duncan. Tyler, when he's on the floor, can hit threes. He shoots them at a pretty high clip. But just point standing, like the spacing was always bad. But we saw toward the end of last year, he was starting to shoot the three. He shot 42 threes last year after having shot like, I don't remember what the exact number was, but like it was like 15, 12, like it was a very low number over his previous, I think, 5, 6, 7 seasons, however long he's been in the league. I've lost count.
Yeah.
Um, at this
Um,
point.
just to pull that up for you, like obviously you said he took 42. The next most he took was 15, and that was in his second season.
Right. Yeah. And a decent, I could probably, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but like a decent amount of those were like, full court heaves or, a grenade at the end of the shot clock. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like him being in rhythm. Like he wouldn't take those during the season. And like, again, he has good shooting form, but last year toward the end of the season, he started taking threes and like he was making them at, a mid-30s clip. And really, towards the end of the season, when he was taking most of them, he was knocking them down at like a near 50% clip. Like I want to say there was like a 15-game stretch or whatever where he was knocking down half his threes, albeit only taking 1, 2, 3 a game. This year, there's been an emphasis. There's been a shift, not just with him, but a team-wide philosophy of shooting threes. He's going to shoot. He said on media day that he wants to shoot at least 100 threes this year. And I think he's going to blow past them. Like I genuinely I think he'll probably take, if he's healthy for 70, 75 games, I think he's going to take 150. Like I think there's like he's giving Spo is giving him like the keys to shoot more threes, and we saw it a little bit when he played in the Olympics. It wasn't a crazy amount, but there were definitely glimpses of him being spaced on the perimeter. And again, like, yeah, you're surrounded by the best players in the world. Like, obviously, your role is going to be a little bit different, but I do think just through preseason to preseason, so take it with a grain of salt. But there has been a shift in him shooting more threes. There's been a shift on the team shooting a higher percentage of their shots from threes in general, because Miami led the league in mid-range frequency last year, believe it or not. They took a lot of inefficient shots, contested twos. That's what they did last year. And like, again, obviously you want to balance, but this year they've taken through 4 preseason games. I was actually looking up the numbers. They've taken over 46% of their shots from deep in the preseason, which is obviously that's not sustainable in over an 82 game sample, but Bam has played a huge part in that. And really everyone, they're not taking those contested. They've only taken 6% of their shots from mid-range. Mm-hmm. They've taken 47% of their shots from the paint, and most of those have been at the rim. So they're trying to get a more efficient shot diet, and big part of that is Bam. Teams are going to play off him. He has a good shooting form. He's got a good base to him. He's got a fine release. Take him. You can take 2, 3, 4, 5 of them a game. Make them respect you, and then you can play off that with attacking the closeouts. He's got a good handle. He's got good slashing ability. It's just a matter of doing this consistently and keeping defense honest, and then it opens up the floor for the rest of your guys. It's going to be easier for Jimmy to score in the paint when Bam's spaced out on the perimeter, and if teams are respecting Bam, it makes it even easier. And that's kind of the shift that you've seen with him offensively. I know that was like a long tangent or whatever, but there seems to be a team-wide shift in shot frequency and shot diet. And there was a report during training camp where when they were doing scrimmages, they were only granting the players 1 point for makes on mid-range shots, while 3 points at the rim or in the paint, and 3 points for normal threes. And so there was like, this is something that Spo is trying to drill into him. Like, again, I'm sure throughout a course of a season, Jimmy's going to take his, Jaime's going to take his, guys are going to take their mid-range shots, but there's going to be a better shot diet, because again, it's hard to be good in today's NBA when you lead the league in mid-range frequency and your best players are just shooting, mid-range shots the majority of the time. It's just hard to win. Like, it's hard to win. Like, you need a balance, sure, especially when it comes to the postseason, but it's just hard to win. You just can't win that way, especially if you're not particularly efficient from those areas, which Miami really, it was okay, but it wasn't like Kevin Durant, like I'm knocking every, effing mid-range shot down frequent. It just wasn't that. And so it's just hard to win. And so there needed to be a shift at some point, and it looks like we're now seeing it. Cross fingers.
Yeah, the offensive evolution in Miami is alive. So I will
Fucking
I will
hope.
say, yeah, for your sake anyway.
I hope. Dude, it was so bad. Like the spacing sucked. It was awful.
So my thing, I know you brought up Jimmy, and we'll get to him in a second, but just kind of like closing the book on this, like pretty much like this long form Bam segment. But pretty much like it seems like we both can agree that Bam is probably going to take another leap this year. But I will ask you this kind of as like a final question on this subject anyway. Do you think Bam finally breaks through and like leads this Miami Heat team in scoring this year?
Um, possibly, possibly.
He's always been hovering around 20 points a game, so I'm hoping at least like he goes
Yeah,
up and adds like a couple more, probably like 24, 23, 24.
yeah.
I
I
see that
think
for him.
in my head, I'm thinking like 22, 22 and a half for him. I do think, and I say maybe because I do think when he's on the floor, when he's engaged, when he's healthy, I think Jimmy will lead the league in scoring, or not lead the league, but lead the team, not lead the league, but lead
Okay.
the team in scoring. Um, and so that's kind of where my head's at. Obviously, Hero's still there. Terry is Terry. Um, so he just adds another, punch to the offense. Um, but I do think Bam could lead the team. Like I'm not ruling it out. If I were to pick, I'd probably say like maybe by a smidge, but I I'm not like if you were to take like any of those
You're not
guys
cementing
really,
it at all.
I'm not cementing it at all.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know, but at least we can both agree that Bam is probably going to take another huge leap this year, and that's going to be real important for Miami because it seems like he's easily slotted himself into like that number 2 on that team. But
Yeah.
talking about like Miami's number 1, obviously it's Jimmy Butler, and something that I forgot to mention, like over the course of the offseason, that you probably know very well, like kind of like that little spat he had with Pat Riley, with like him talking about like the postseason and whatnot. But I want you to kind of like dive into how you feel about Jimmy going into the season because also I believe he's on like the last year of his deal, and obviously Jimmy's in his mid 30s now. So I kind of just want to like pick your brain how you're feeling about Jimmy going into the season, and kind of like if you want to allude to the stuff that was going on when he got injured and all that other stuff, like feel free. But floor is yours, my friend.
Jimmy, it was revealed recently that he was going through some personal matters last year. A lot of the time that he did miss 22. I just want to say it was 22 games. Um, was due to like most of that was due to personal matters. So it's fair to take that into context. There were plenty of times throughout last season, especially, the personal matter was revealed that his dad died. And people who I talked to knew that. Obviously, that's not something that was going to get released right away. That obviously you don't necessarily reveal that stuff. Um, but the thing with Jimmy last year, again, including that time after that happened, before that time, whatnot, you could tell he wasn't engaged. And I say engaged like there were nights where, and again, it's like when we're fans, people watching, this stuff, you're watching. It's like, how would you feel if someone was watching you at work and evaluating your performance at work? That's what we're doing for NBA players, and that's what we're doing for these guys. And like Jimmy was going through some personal shit. You never know what someone else is going through in their life. Um, and he was obviously going through some shit for the end, for reasons I just mentioned. Um, but he wasn't like there were times where he would be the third or fourth best player on the team on the floor at a given time, especially games late in season that Miami needed to win to avoid the play-in. Because I saw that like crunched, after after Boston obviously blew the doors off of everyone. There was like a not a big gap between 2 and 8. It was like a 5-game gap or something like that. And obviously, games down the stretch, Jimmy wasn't being Jimmy. And that was very and even before that stuff happened, like it was the entire season. So that part was concerning. He's coming off the most serious knee injury of his career, sprained MCL. He's already had knee problems in the past. Like his knees have been effed since like he was with the Bulls. Like it's been bad for a long time. And he's missed time during the seasons because of his knees. And like, I don't think it's just necessary. I think I don't remember exactly what the injury was at the time, but it was just injuries, and it's just like it's flared up over time. Like, and obviously certain things trigger it too. But like his knees are messed up, and so like coming off a sprained MCL, like again throughout the preseason he's looked great, but if I'm getting that over an 82 games, like I just wonder how active he's going to be. Because it feels like every year they're like, Jimmy's going to have the healthiest season of his career, the healthiest season with the Heat. And it's just like, it's whether his body, it's not up to him. It's his body. Like that shit can flare up, or that he can get hurt in January. We don't know that now. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just, it's the body. Like I still don't necessarily trust his body to stay healthy for an 82 game season is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I think for him, being in a contract year, he's trying to get that last contract because the situation with it is he has a player option next year, and so obviously he can at this point in time next summer he can ask for 2 more years for max money, which is going to be around. I don't remember what the exact number is, but it's like 55, 56, 50, like that per. Actually, maybe more than that with the cap raise, if that's the case. I don't remember what the exact number is off the top of my head, but he's going to be making a lot of money, point nonetheless. So he wants that last contract, and obviously, if he has a bad season or if he gets hurt or something like that, he's just going to opt in probably. So we're going to be doing the same song and dance again next season because I don't know if they're going to pay him. So he's, I think, really motivated to have a good season, and I think he will. But will his body allow him to is the biggest question.
Yeah, I would say
I don't know.
if
I can't tell you that.
If Jimmy finds a way to stay healthy, and with all the reasons you mentioned, it's like, it was funny. It was good that you mentioned like kind of like all that stuff that was going on with him, with his dad dying, and everything. You can only imagine what like that could cause someone, let alone like a professional athlete who has to travel all over. Like, I completely understand why like he would pretty much not be worrying about basketball or anything. I think even there was a quote that said I could give
Yep.
less of a shit about basketball right now. Like that.
Yeah, he's like, my teammates need me to win these games, or like they need me to be who I am, but I just couldn't.
Yeah. So like, but it seems like, at least on the outside, hopefully he's in a better place. And not even for the NBA's sake, not even for Miami, just for his sake, because like we all know his story and how coming up and then going through Marquette and everything, like he's been fighting his entire life. So like, Jimmy Butler is a very commendable person and a very commendable NBA player. Um, and like to your point with him being injured and everything, he was run into the ground on those Bulls teams and in Minnesota with Tibbs and everything like that. So like obviously like he has a lot of NBA miles on him and a lot of
Right.
trip up and down the floor. So I will say, like when he's at his very best, you know exactly what you get out of Jimmy Butler. You have somebody who can drag an 8th seed to an NBA finals at like and in the best of times. And there's other times where, like they get knocked out in the play, well, not even in the play, but in like in the opening rounds of the playoffs and all that, or last year when he wasn't even available. But kind of because we're coming up with time, I wanted to ask you, like, where do you see with everything that we factored in, and we didn't really dive into guys like Jovic and like really like I know we touched upon like Jaime Jaquez and some of the other guys around this roster, but let me ask you, like, do you think Miami's going to be able to kind of get back to where they were a couple years ago when they're one of the better teams in the East, or do you see them kind of in the middle of the pack or kind of around the same area they were last year at? Look, so pretty much I want to hear like kind of like your predictions for like Miami going into the season this year.
It's hard to gauge to some extent because again, they're never healthy together. They just haven't been, or at least the core three, Tyler, Jimmy, and Pam. They just haven't been healthy all that much together. And so again, I don't know. I'm not going to try to predict injuries on here, but they haven't consistently stayed healthy together. In addition to Terry, in addition, like they haven't. And so it's tough to gauge from that perspective. I still have them in the plan. I think they're obviously. I think Boston's in its own tier. And then I think they're behind, some of the other teams in the East, like New York, like Milwaukee, like Cleveland. Like, not to say they're a bad team. Like, I think they're going to win more than, their projected Vegas over-unders, I think 44.5 most places. I think they're going to supersede that, but I just don't know. Like, I think they can make it out of the play. Like, I think they can be a top 6 seed. It's just a matter of if these guys stay healthy. And, like, obviously, I think this is one of the deeper teams that they've had in recent memory, like just going on down the list quickly. Obviously, I think Duncan, he had a back injury last year that isn't fully recoverable from, but he is a player when he's healthy, when he's rested, he's one of the best shooters on the planet. There's a reason why he's the best. He's the best shooter in franchise history. Not many people can actually say that. Haywood Highsmith. I'm just going on down the list. Just Haywood Highsmith, a 3D guy they re-signed in the offseason who's been, I think, continuing to add to his game with his 3-point shot, with his, obviously, he's one of the better point of attack defenders that they have. Nikola Jovic, a guy who's probably going to start this year. He started 41 of their final 44 games last year. He's another guy where he's developed his team defense amicably. Like, he's become, a rock solid team defender. Not so much an individual defender yet, but he's, developed that trait. He's 6'10", 6'11". He's one of the few guys on the roster that can be functionally big next to Bam, even though he's not going to play like him big because of his European skills that he already had, in addition to him shooting nearly 40% from three last year. Jaime Jaquez, we talked about him already. Like, he's another guy where he is working. He said he's worked on his 3-point shot the most this offseason. He was low 30s last year, but you add that in addition to what he can also do. Like, he's your YMCA hooper who's going to show up at the gym and play like old man game in the most complimentary way possible, in addition to what he can do defensively as a team defender. Like, Josh Richardson's another guy that's going to help out when he recovers from shoulder surgery. Alec Burks is the guy they signed this offseason who, can add some 3-point shooting in addition to like what they already, like some secondary ball handling. Not the best defender, but Terry's another guy. Like, they drafted Khalil Ware, who has who had motor problems coming out of college. But he's another guy where it's like, you see there's like a raw skill set there with him being 7 foot, 7'1". They haven't had a 7 foot big like him in the Bam era. Like, the closest guy that I can think of who was even close was, obviously this is post Whiteside. Whiteside's probably the best comparison, but like Myers Leonard, who was a floor spacing stretch big who played 15, 20 minutes a night. He's not, Khalil Ware is better than Myers Leonard, or he's going to be better than Myers Leonard. Like, another one would be like Olynyk. I think obviously differing skill sets, but I do think Ware he may be better than Olynyk was, even though Olynyk's still chugging along. Having a good long career. Like, there's a skill set there with the shooting, or not the shooting, but the vertical spacing, the shot blocking, even some of the rebounding, even though he sometimes just gets boxed out by dudes who are 6'4". Effing pisses me off. Just like stuff like that. Like, there's a raw skill set there that they're going to mold over time, and I do think he's going to be like a functional big at the NBA level. A guy who I'm just telling people who are watching this, buy stock in now, Pele Larson, their 2nd round pick, who was a glue guy at Arizona this last year. I know 2nd round picks are 2nd round, but like, people aren't going to look at a 2nd round pick being like, ooh, that guy's going to be an NBA rotation player ever, or few of them actually hit. This guy's going to hit. So I'm just telling people, like, buy stock on Pele Larson. He can literally do everything on a basketball court at 6'5", 6'6" that you want. Well, just I'm not even, just buy stock on him. If you don't, it's going to be too late for you in a few years. That's just
I love it.
I'm just gonna say that, like, just buy a stock on Larson. And if I'm wrong, fine.
So be it.
I don't think I'm gonna be wrong, but I'm just saying buy a stock on Larson. Again, it may not be this year. It may be next year, maybe the year after that, but he's gonna be an NBA rotation player and he's gonna be a damn good one.
I was gonna ask to see if you had like anything, like any breakout candidates or anything like that, but it seems like in terms of like final thoughts, it seems like you're good. Like you really hell bent on this kid too.
I was all in. I mean, you could read my draft profile from the site, vendettasportsmedia.com. Please go check that out. I was a fan of Larson. I did some extensive work late in the pre-draft process with him, and I liked what I saw. And I think summer league and preseason, I mean, mostly summer league. Again, summer league is summer league. But if you get called a plug and play rotation player by your head coach, the best head coach in the league before you step foot on an NBA court, like Eric Spoelstra did with Larson, you're doing something right.
Okay.
Some high words. High praise.
Yeah, some words, some like words to like kind of like just plaster on your wall somewhere, like as a message to yourself every time you leave the house. But
it's been an up and down preseason for him. I'll admit it hasn't been perfect. It's preseason. Summer league is summer league. Preseason is preseason. Again, take all of it with a grain of salt. But
yeah,
for what they like, for what they want to see in players, for what the skill set that he can provide to a basketball court defensively, from a 3-point shooting perspective, from a glue guy perspective, like not even a guy who's going to light up the stat sheet, but a guy who's going to do the little things. Yeah, he's going to fight. I think he's going to be a player. And I know there's a few other guys that I didn't mention, like Kevin Love, who you know who Kevin Love is at this point. Isaiah Stevens, who was an undrafted guy who I'm very high on. Kishad Johnson's another one who they signed to a 2-way contract. Who another guy who played with Larson at Arizona, who he's going to piss a lot of people off with how he plays. Like piss people off that he plays against because they're going to be annoyed with him. Because he's just going to be in their face the whole time and he's going to be relentless. And so I think they nailed the draft. Off season, maybe not as much with the free agency or whatnot, but I still think this team will be, around a playing spot.
Yeah, and you can never really count Miami out these last couple of years with how that, like, especially with like the 2023 run a couple of years ago. Like you kind of, if they're healthy, they're probably going to be like, I wouldn't call them a trap game because that's usually like for teams like, oh, you can just overlook them, but you can't always be super sure about Miami. But Matt,
many times over the last, sorry to interrupt.
No,
so many times over the last 2, 3, 4 years, they've run out like a G League team, and they'll whoop teams' ass by like 12 points, 15 points. Like it's just like they'll get dudes off the street and Spoelstra. Like I feel like Spoelstra likes those games more than like he actually likes having the guys healthy. Obviously, he wants his best players healthy when it matters most, but I think he takes some pride of like, okay, this is a game where I can really coach by what off and beat Team X with this team that I have now.
NBA Finals.
Yeah, like that's just how he is. At least again, I don't know this for certain, but
yeah,
I think he takes an extra sense of pride with running. I think calling them G League players is disrespectful, but not your star players. If you get a bunch of role players on the floor against your best, like he of course is willing to take those chances sometimes, and he's prideful of like the times that he's able to coach his off and like sometimes beat those guys, which he's done so much over the last couple of years, just in a regular season sample.
Like I can outcoach you with my guys better than you can you can't outcoach me with your guys, and your guys are better than my guys.
Yeah, like it was different, obviously. Different in the postseason with Boston, but like I'm just speaking in like a regular season context, like in a normal, like random, February game. He's just like, oh, I have Jimmy out, I have Hero out, Bam is questionable, so our best player tonight is going to be X, Y, Z, so on and so forth. And it's just very funny to see people's reactions being like, at least in past years, like, wait, Max Strus did what? Gabe Vincent did what?
Caleb Martin.
Player X did what? Like there was a moment in 22 where they had just guys dropped to COVID, like just players dropping like flies. And they were signing hardship guys. And there was, I think, a game against, I want to say it was Houston, where Kyle Guy, a guy they picked up off the street, scored like 25 in the game. They're like, what? Like, and I think they won. Maybe they didn't. I think they won too.
Yeah,
That was also a point in time where the entire league was dropping like flies due to COVID. So it wasn't just a one person thing.
yeah. But all right, Matt. Any final thoughts about Miami going into the season? Anything like that?
Just stay healthy. Get to April healthy. Get to mid-April healthy. Because if you get to mid-April healthy, regardless of what seed this team is,
could be.
Can't count them out.
Yeah.
Cannot count them out. Do not bet against Eric Spoelstra.
Okay.
They just have to get to that point healthy, which again, to be determined.
Always got to pray for things like that.
Just get to mid-April healthy and let Spoelstra work his black magic, because he's the best coach in the league, and he's 17 steps ahead of an opponent and has another 17 tricks up his sleeve to whip out at any given moment for whatever team that he's facing. Again, assuming they're healthy. If they're not healthy, then it's gonna be a lot harder, like we saw last year.
Never count out Miami. Words from Matt Hanifan, and I'm pretty sure words from Eric Spoelstra as well. But guys, that's gonna conclude the Miami Heat's NBA previews for the 2024-2025 season. If you guys enjoy, any support on the video would be appreciated. Go check out Better Sports Media. Check out all the good content, all the previous NBA previews we've done for many, many more teams. And we're going to be covering all 30 NBA teams before opening night. And be sure to go check out Vanilla Sports Media to catch up with everything, all your favorite sports. MLB postseason in full swing. NFL season is in mid-season form. You have NHL, everything your mind could think of as a sports fan. We got it for you. But with all that being said, guys, I've been Jiarmani Depena. That's been Matt Hanifan. That's been Miami Heat NBA season preview. And we'll catch you guys next time.